Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Critical Healing Moment. In today's video, I am going to talk about how I prepared for my social work field placement interview. If you're new here, my name is V, and this is my channel where I talk about social work and healing our social movements. Welcome to my channel. I've grown a lot since my I Do Not Dream of Labor video, so I'm excited that there are more of you here. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and help me get to 500 subscribers. That would be a huge milestone for me. And yeah, let's get into it. In today's video, I'm talking about how I prepared for my field placement interview, and I did have it just a few days ago, and I think that it went pretty well. To be honest, I'm a pretty good interviewer. I think it's just kind of in my characteristics to make good first impressions on people, but we'll see what that means for the rest of the school year social work program if I ever finish my degree. So I'm just going to walk you through this process of preparing for that video, both in sort of the long-term sense and how I've been preparing like my whole career for this, and also what I did in the short term. First of all, I think one thing to remember when you're in a social work program and going through your field placement interviews is that this is supposed to be a mutually compatible situation. So the agency should want you there and you should want to be at the agency. So you know that you have options. You have to advocate for yourself and you have to be aware of your needs. So I think that it's very important, and it's not just like, you can't be desperate with it. You have to be picky and know what you want in terms of what you want to learn. A lot of the prep work that I did was kind of a result of being a little bit lost in social work for the last, I don't know, year, half a year, few months, 8 months, whatever. Like, I was just feeling very confused about where my place was in the field of social work. One thing that really helped me prepare for this, and something that I've always been very interested in, is sort of like personality tests and personality typologies. One of the things that has been very helpful is looking at a few of these different types of surveys and personality tests and looking at what these tests say and reflecting on those characteristics and getting a sense of, does this really fit me, and being very honest with myself about what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. One thing that really helped kick this off for me, and I know I have mentioned it a couple of times in different videos, is the macro social work course that was created by Gabby over at Mind Your Society. That course was super helpful for me when I was really lost and confused and was wondering if I should go clinical, go macro in social work. Honestly, I think that even if you are a clinical social worker or interested in clinical social work, taking that course can be very useful because there are activities and like worksheets and different things that Gabby has created that would work for anyone, regardless of where you are in social work or even just like your career in general. I'm going to go through and share a few things that were in that course that were really helpful for me, some of them being these personality tests. So in Gabby's macro social work course, there were, I believe, 3 personality tests, one of which that I've already done before and 2 that were new to me. And I think seeing how different personality tests kind of work or don't work together can be really useful in sort of like getting a more well-rounded picture of who you are, rather than just looking at one type, because I think that it can be easy to stereotype personality types because obviously they're meant to be sort of very shortcut heuristic tools to kind of understanding who someone is. The first one that I will talk about is Myers-Briggs type indicator, or the 16 personalities test. So this test I actually took when I was in undergrad. I worked as a student assistant in the career center, so my supervisor was a career coach, and I was able to take the official Myers-Briggs type indicator test when I was like, I don't know how old I was like 21, 22 years old at that point, I think. I think I was probably 21. I will always go by that official test because I think that it's the official one. And on that one, I scored being an INTJ, which means I am introverted, intuitive, thinking, and judgmental. I've usually scored this, but recently when I did it again through the process of the macro social work course, I actually got a different score or a different personality type. I got INFJ, which is apparently very prevalent in the social justice area. And I think that this is one of the instances where it's very sensitive. It can be very sensitive to what you're currently going through in that moment. And so I think in that moment, when I was taking it, I was a little bit more emotionally vulnerable, even though that's not typically how I am. And so I think that time I took it, it was a little bit off, but it's just really one letter off. INTJ, INFJ. The T and F for me has always been kind of in the middle. And also, when I took it again, it wasn't the official test, so I will always stick by being an INTJ. That really means that I am very analytical. I have an ability to sort of like sift through information and make decisions. I have a skill for like following my intuition and my gut. I think that's what it means. I have done very little prep in like reviewing things for this video. Anyways, so Myers-Briggs type indicator, something that has always been sort of my go-to, historically been my go-to in terms of personality tests. And so the other two personality type surveys in Gabby's macro social work course is the VIA characteristics survey. This one I had never done before. I think there's a list of like, I don't know, 20 or 30 characteristics, or no, sorry, it's called the VIA character survey. And so there's a bunch of different characteristics, things that you values, that it sort of ranks when you answer the questions. And so I think that, you can go ahead and do it, but I think I would go and like also do Gabby's course because she offers a lot of like reflection questions and different activities that you do with the characteristics, because it's one thing to have the list, but then another to kind of know how to process it and kind of make career decisions off of it. Not that I dream of labor. But my top 5 strengths on the VIA character survey were creativity, love of learning, perspective, prudence, and honesty. And then another thing that the sort of macro social work guide tells you to do is to sort of like pick ones that stand out to you, not just the ones that are the ones that they rank you with. So for those, I picked out curiosity and appreciation of beauty and excellence. So those are sort of, I would say, like my top 7 strengths according to the VIA character survey. And then lastly, one of the personality tests that is in the macro social work course is called High 5, which after looking into it, it is sort of the free version of the Strengths Finder quiz. For the High 5 / Strengths Finder, I'm actually going to kind of say them side by side because I think that it is the free version. And it just so happened that I picked this book up, the Strengths Finder 2.0 sort of guide at a thrift store back in like December or January. And these little tab pages are my strengths. And so I was able to look at the High 5 results, find the comparable one in the Strengths Finder, and like read more about it using this book, which is pretty cool. And I think that the thrift store had so many of these. I think that people, use them for at a certain period of their life and then donate them. And I think if you, go into any thrift store, you might find a few copies of this book. My High 5 characteristics, High 5 / Strengths Finder characteristics are strategist and strategic, timekeeper / discipline, coach / developer, deliverer / responsibility, and believer / belief. So I think you can see here that I'm very, dedicated, I'm very committed to things, and I'm very much driven by my values. So all seems consistent to me. And also coach, developer. I love that because I used to want to be a career coach. When I was working with a career coach, I was like, this sounds like a cool job. Mentoring, developing youth, that's a thing that I still love to do. Okay, so in addition to the personality tests that were included in Gabby's macro social work course, there are other tools that I have in my toolbox in terms of understanding my personality, and one of them is Enneagram, and I am Enneagram type 1 wing 2, which is the reformer with the helper wing. Yeah, I don't know what else you can say. I'm a perfectionist, recovering, who's very motivated by helping people and making them better, to put it bluntly. The last thing that I will mention that, is sometimes a for fun thing and sometimes is more serious, and that's astrology. So I, am familiar with like the whole birth chart, and I don't go to it as often as I am interested in some of these other personality types, but I am a Libra sun, balance, Virgo moon, so there's that discipline and routine, and I am a Leo rising sign, so that explains why I guess I center myself on my YouTube channel, and wear loud shirts. I feel like those are the most important things that you kind of need to know. Those are like the 3 things people always ask about, right? So I think looking at all of these things together, it's pretty consistent, and I'm like kind of weirded out by it. Like my Myers-Briggs, my Strengths Finder, my birth chart, my Enneagram, I feel like they're all the same, and so they do add a little bit of nuance to each other because I think they do different sort of emphases in each type of personality test, but I think taking all of this information in together, I can really reflect on who am I and what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. That is sort of like a lot of the groundwork in terms of preparing for your social work field placement interview. It's really just knowing who you are, and I'm saying, you don't have to use these tools, but if you use any one of them or all of them, I think they can be very helpful in terms of helping you reflect on who you are and knowing what you're motivated by and knowing what environments you're comfortable in and how you thrive. The second way that I prepared for the interview was kind of, an external requirement for me, and that was my field placement application. And I already mentioned in my previous video about my field placement update that for this program, I actually had to submit a few writing samples and essay questions in order to apply for my field placements, and I thought that was a really great thing because even though it's an assignment, it is one that helps you prepare for success. There were a couple different sections. Some of these sections were actually sent to the field agency, and some of them were more for the placement office so that they could pick out an organization for you. And I'll just read out a few sentences from some of these questions. So the field application asked for me to write about 3 of my strengths and 3 of my areas of enhancement. And I like how they wrote that out. Areas of enhancements, not weaknesses, not even challenges. They make it very goal-oriented, which I really appreciate. So here is what I wrote for my strengths. 3 of my personal strengths are my ability to bring a big picture perspective and alternative insights to interpersonal dynamics. That's the first one. Acting consistently with my own personal ethics and values rooted in healing-centered liberation, and my ability to create structures and routines in complex situations. So I am very proud of what I had written there, and what really actually helped me write this was all of the work that I did with the whole personality tests and self-reflection and all of that. Just with all of the different activities that were included in the macro social work course, it very much helped me paint this picture of me that wasn't just like, I don't know, super work related or something that, you know, some generic response that you would want to put on, you know, a work application or what you would say in your interview. This is like really truly strengths of mine that I truly believe in and that I want people to know. I wrote more about it, but I'm not going to read that to you all. And the second question was 3 areas of enhancement. So I'll read that. The first area of enhancement I would like to focus on during the upcoming academic year is to improve my ability to have courageous conversations and transform conflict. Obviously, you know, this is something that has been on my mind a lot lately, and I really want to dig into it, and I would love a space to practice that. Secondly, I would like to gain a better sense of understanding the process of rapport and trust building that feels authentic to me. You know, I kind of wrote this out of an insecurity of mine that was worsened in my first field placement, where like my supervisor was like, you don't know how to do relationship building and I don't trust you and stuff like that. And so I'm like curious if there's something that I'm doing that's off about that process. And I want to do it in a way that feels authentic to me, because I think that sometimes like you can put together all these like little games and activities to kind of force trust building and force community building, but I've never found them to be particularly organic, I guess. And so I hope to truly kind of understand what that's like more. Lastly, I would like to improve my public speaking and facilitation skills so that it comes across more naturally. Obviously, making videos like this helps too, especially when I prepare less and can speak more extemporaneously. I would like to rely less on notes. I think that you can tell when I have like an extensive sort of video essay kind of video, I'm reading off of a script, and I would just like to sound more natural on those things. And that goes for my channel as well as when I'm doing like workshops and facilitating and things like that. Those are my 3 strengths and 3 areas of enhancement. That stuff I put together in like April or May, right? So it's been a few months, and when I found out about my field placement and where it could be, then I had to kind of revisit and put myself back into that social work mindset and put on that social work hat, because for a while I had just been a person who wasn't doing that kind of stuff. So when I learned about my placement in particular, I started thinking about what I would want to ask and what was important for me to ask in the interview. And so I started like writing notes in my phone whenever I was out and about, and I would think of these things. It happens to me a lot. I just think of random things, and I've side note, don't always have my bullet journal on me, or it's inconvenient to pull it out. So I've been taking a lot of notes on my phone, and I'm actually slowly migrating away from using my bullet journal, but I guess I can talk more about that in a different video. But I would jot these things down, and then I like sat down for like, I don't know, an hour, and I actually just focused on all of this. So what I did in that time was I reviewed my responses to the field application questions, because I wanted to be like a consistent person from like who I was when I was writing that application to who I am now, and I haven't changed that much since then. So I reviewed, and I was like, oh yeah, like this is what I wanted to do, and like because I had already put in all of this work in sort of the long-term groundwork of figuring out what my goals are. So I just wanted to refresh myself, as well as looking back at some of the results from some of these personality tests and surveys. And then I kind of got to just like re-summarizing some of my notes. So let me turn here in my journal. So I think that, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it's the interview is not just about you impressing the organization or the interviewer, but it's also about making sure that that placement is going to be the right fit for you. And so what I did and what I think could be very important for other people to do is before you even really look into the organization and all of that, is just to think about yourself and put yourself first and write down what your goals and priorities are. That's literally what I wrote in my journal. What are my goals and priorities? And I put down some, bullet point notes on that, and they're mostly around like work style and supervision for me. For other people's goals and priorities, maybe it's to learn about, a different issue area or a population. Maybe it's to practice like cultural humility, or cultural competency, or being around more diverse people, or whatever that may be. I think that you have to think about that for yourself. And obviously all of these different elements are important in a field placement, but really think what is the most important thing for you. And for me, it was about supervision, because my journal has been very helpful for me, and I want to go back because I just thought of this right now. This is on my Instagram page, but I made this little vision board for this year, and I actually took a picture of it, and it's my phone background. One of my visions for this year is finding my teachers and mentors, so that is directly related to supervision and field instruction. So I have this whole I'm going to cover up part of this because it's about the agency specifically. So I have all these notes here. The next thing that I wrote down are my goals, which is the areas of enhancement, and also my strengths. So I just kind of summarized from my essay there. And then I have a section about the agency. So obviously research where you're interviewing with. I'm going to be at a private school, and honestly the website didn't have too much information, so it's going to depend on the agency, but hopefully you find something about the agency that you can kind of draw from to kind of get a sense of what the agency is going to be like, because I think from websites you can see if an agency is very formal or if it's very creative and that whole thing. Something that I really liked that the agency had on their website, it's a English translation of a Hebrew quote from the Torah, I think. And it's educate each child according to his or her nature. I really love that quote. And I wrote that down. I really only wrote down 3 points, that being the most important thing. It was just number of enrollment and the grades. That stuff doesn't matter too much to me. But that quote really stood out to me as something that, if it's important for them to put on their website, it must somehow be important to their school. And I forgot to mention that I will be interning, hopefully, fingers crossed, at an Orthodox Jewish private school. So yeah, that'll be interesting, and I'll get back more to that in a little bit. So then I prepared some questions for the interviewer. And I split them up into 2 sections. One is about the agency / internship, and the other one is about the supervisor. So I wrote down questions that are kind of what kind of assignments do interns get? What are some challenges that interns typically face? Will I get a caseload? What are the hours? Logistical things like that. And also keep in mind that this is not a list of questions that it's going to be boom, 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 I'm going to go in and ask these questions. This is more for what information is important for me to find out by the end of the interview. So I didn't even have to ask most of these questions because they just shared that over the course of the interview. So I'm going to go into the more important part for me, and that was questions about the supervisor. And again, this was one of the things where I didn't have to actually ask a lot of these questions, but a lot of them were sort of answered over the process of the interview. So I asked questions, or I had written down questions like, How did you end up in the social work field? What do you like about having interns and being a field instructor? I didn't really get direct answers to those questions, but I felt like what I got was sufficient for me. How do you provide feedback? How do you receive feedback? Because it is a non-secular school. One of my questions was, how do you reconcile when your religious differences or when your religious values differ from social work values? I actually didn't get to ask that question just because the interview went for so long and we talked about a bunch of other things that kind of gave me a sense of, you know, how this question might be answered. And another one was, how do you discuss like culture, race, and diversity with interns? This was particularly, you know, if you watch my other video on it, you kind of know that this is something that was more intentional for them. In the process of them sort of talking to me, and it was a very casual interview, I kind of got a sense of how they would answer these questions. I have like a whole bunch of more questions there, but really these are just some ideas for you on what you may want to ask your supervisor. And then the last thing I did, well, actually there's two more things that I did to prepare for my interview, and that is, you know, there are a lot of lists online of like most common interview questions. So I found one of these lists. I think it was from the Muse. That's one of my go-to websites for like career, you know, topics and things like that, and they have a whole list of common interview questions and strategies to answer them. So I picked out a couple questions that I felt like would be very challenging for me to answer on the spot, and one of them is like, tell me about a time when you handled a conflict. The other one is, tell me about a time you failed or made a mistake, and the other one was, why did you transfer grad schools? Because I felt like those are things where I needed to be very concise and to the point and get across like what I learned out of that process, and I really wanted to find good examples of that. You know, the recommendation for those kinds of questions is like, don't tell them about like your biggest mistake in life ever, but one that had, you know, was important enough for it to have some severe consequences, but one that you could illustrate that you learned a lot from. And so I had to think of like specific examples for those and just like, you know, refresh myself on what happened so that I can kind of paint the picture. A long time ago, we took like a workshop on like career stuff. They talked about this strategy called the STAR strategy, and I think it stands for situation, task, action, and result. So it's like what the situation was, what you're assigned to do, what you did, and what was the result of that. And I think that's a really great basic framework for answering interview questions. Okay, lastly, and I feel like I've already talked way too long. I have no idea how long this video is, and I'm feeling slightly hungry, as I always do by the end of my videos, is and you may not have a resource like this if you haven't taken a social work course yet, but I have this textbook that I got that was assigned for my in my previous program. We took a class on race and diversity, and it is called Ethnicity and Family Therapy by McGoldrick and a bunch of other authors, and it's a really interesting book. So basically they have a bunch of different ethnicities in here, I guess in the American or Western context as like immigrants. So we have we have like African American families, African American Muslim families, Brazilian families, Dominican, Cambodian, Korean, I'm just slipping through, Indian Hindu, Palestinian, Scottish Irish, Israeli, Czech and Slovak families. And so what I did, knowing that I was going to be in a homogenous community, I remembered that I had this book, and it's usually on my fireplace as a display because I think it looks kind of cool. Like the colors and everything looks kind of cool, right? But I read the section on Orthodox Jewish families, not to be like, oh, I'm going to come in and like be like, oh, this is all I know about Orthodox Jewish families, but more to get a sense of what some issues the children or families may be facing, what might be the priorities in the community and what values they may have, and how that kind of fits in with social work. And I just kind of read it as, it's just good to be informed and to know a little bit about what to expect. So that's the last thing I did. I literally was like sitting in front of my computer waiting for, it happened on Zoom, waiting for the interview to happen, and I was just reading this, and I didn't really have to, use any of the knowledge in the book, but from what the interviewer was saying about the community, it sounded very consistent with what the book also had to say about the community. So yeah, that is it. I would say also, if you're doing a Zoom interview, make sure you have a like appropriate background, you're dressed at least top up, and have your computer charger, which I did not have, so I had to leave. First of all, the interview went way longer than I expected. It went like an hour and a half. I thought it was going to be like maximum an hour, but my computer has like horrible battery life, so it started to die like, around 1 hour. So if it was an hour, it would have lasted, but it went like 30 minutes over what I expected. Not that we had established an expectation, so I guess it could have lasted forever. But overall, I would say it went really well. I wrote down something, during the interview. Also, I took notes. I also had my resume in front of me. Also, that's one thing I forgot to mention is look over your resume, prepare your resume, update your resume, send it to your interviewer. I felt like that was obvious, so I didn't really mention it. But I picked up on the personality of the person who would be my supervisor during the interview from how they conducted the interview. And I felt like it was a little bit like super unstructured, and she didn't really have a list of questions. It was kind of like informal, and she also mentioned herself, she's like not super great at organization or like processes and details, which is why I would be such a strength being an INTJ, etc., etc. That might be an area where you may have to foresee some challenges in terms of, if I'm super structured and I expect routine, for example, and my supervisor is a little bit unstructured, like it's a place where I'm going to have to need to be very clear about my expectations and what's helpful for me and communicate them. And I would say, honestly, I have worked with previous managers who are like that, and I think that it's usually pretty compatible because I'm able to be very independent and get my work done without them, being all up in my space, and I can be very competent when I'm doing things on my own. And I think that's where I really struggled with having a supervisor who was watching my every move and had a particular way that they wanted things to go. Because I can usually figure out my way around things and do it my own way while understanding the parameters that I'm given. So I do think, honestly, that this will be a pretty good fit. I did have hesitations before. I think that we talked about a lot of things too that were not necessarily related to, they're not typical things that you would really talk about in an interview. I guess like she kind of opened up about like asking about my summer, and I talked about gardening, which is like pretty much the only thing that I've been really doing for fun. And she was like, oh my god, like it would be great if you could bring back this garden program that we used to have that one of the teachers used to run. And I was like, I would absolutely love that. Like if I could teach third graders how to garden, that would be, oh my god, I would absolutely love that. I have a number of different interests that are helpful to social work that I didn't get to bring up, like yoga, like art, but those are all things that I can bring up later. And she shared with me like a couple of different like books that she found very useful, and I shared with her like some books that I've recently read that have been super useful, and it was just like a very mutual exchange, which I personally really appreciate. And I think that is what really gave me the confidence in this placement in particular. So yeah, overall, that's how I prepared for my social work field placement interview. And I hope that watching this video helps some of you out there who put in the comments that you'd be interested in seeing how I prep, and that this video comes out in time for you to watch it and then maybe apply some of those things that may be helpful for you before your interview. Thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe, all of those things. I mean, honestly, like and comment, those are the best things for YouTube. Subscribe if you want, subscribe. It warms my heart to wake up to more subscribers every day, and I'm somewhat scared of kind of, you know, having a bigger audience and more eyes on me, but it's also very exciting, but mixed feelings. Anyways, I'm going to have a snack now because I'm hungry, and I'll see you next time. Bye!